Hello and welcome back to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock. This is my 5th episode from the road and the second part of my visit to Fort Collins, Colorado. Today we will hear my conversation with Wendy Mosh, President and CEO at New West Genetics, a company that specializes in hemp genetics, breeding, and agribusiness, and whose mission is to make sustainable, large-scale production of hemp fiber and grain a reality. But first, a quick shout out to the sponsors of our tour and whose logos are on the back of our RV, which my wife has named Dolly. IND Hemp, New Holland Agriculture, the National Hemp Association, Amerishon Cast Hemp, Rose Downs, Victory Hemp Food, and also a shout out to Hemp Harvest Works, Pterodon Hemp, and King's Agri-Seeds. We are very grateful for your help in making this hemp quest happen. So this afternoon, after visiting with Morris Beagle and his collection of hemp guitars, I drove the RV across town to meet with Wendy Mosh. She is smart and focused and a whole
Wendy
lot of
Mosh
fun
from
to
New
talk
West
to.
Genetics. Welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you for having me, Eric.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, because here I am on tour in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Welcome.
Could you introduce yourself?
Sure. Yes. Hello to everybody. My name is Wendy, as Eric said, and I'm the CEO and president of New West Genetics. And New West Genetics is about 7 years old, and I'm one of the founding members.
And what does New West Genetics do?
We create stable hemp varieties for large-scale mechanical production and also for various markets, so for grain, fiber, and CBD markets.
Cool. Sounds like I'm in the right place then. So I was looking on your website, and sort of the high-level description talked about the sustainable large-scale production. So can you tell me what the path to sustainable large-scale production is and why it's important?
Sure. So in order to compete with, typical row crops. So, I would say New West Genetics emphasis is on breeding for row crop production method. You need to breed stable, high-yielding varieties in order for farmers to adopt them. The reason it's so imperative, we believe, for farmers to grow hemp is not only because of, the nutrition and the change that it will create within the alternative protein realm as well as the omega realm, but also because, adding another rotation to farmers' land is crucial right now. The continual soy corn rotation is really killing soils, as we know, and we're seeing incredible benefits, and it's beginning research still, right? The university agronomists are just beginning to find out, all of the amazing things, but we're seeing disease suppression. We're seeing also phytoremediation, of course, which we've known about for a while, but incredible benefits when we use it as a rotation. So more sustainable, right?
Right. So tell me how you work with farmers and what farmers can expect from working with you.
So, we've been, I like to say one thing I want to, point out about breeding is New West does typically see ourselves as the first evolution of our company was as an R&D company. Good breeding takes time. So that feedback from farmers is crucial throughout the process. So I would say within the first iteration of our company, we were working with farmers principally on trialing different, what I would like to call families. So not exact varieties yet, right? And, just getting their feedback year over year on, what water usage was required, what planting density, what row spacing, how it suited their equipment. So all of those pieces, we take into account as we breed. So that was the first iteration of how we work with farmers is, we would pay them land lease, we would pay them if they were doing some of the caretaking of the crop. Most of the time we do the caretaking of the crop, but that was the relationship. And always, our hope is that those farmers become our customers as well. And that has happened. So now with our first product we released back in 2020, so just last year, our first true variety was released. We have customers. So a key piece, I think, to supporting farmers, and we're seeing adoption across the Midwest in particular, is supporting them throughout the growth cycle. So offering, we didn't start out to be the agronomic experts by any means, but we've since added agronomists, and just because we've been doing it so long, since 2014, we do have this expertise to offer, and of course it's tailored to our genetics. So supporting our farmers is key. We always encourage them to start small. I mean, the mistake the CBD industry made was selling without care, right, for the producers. And we never want to do that. So we encourage them to start small. Let's do trials and then grow as we find the variety that suits your production environment. So,
okay. What kinds of challenges do the farmers have still?
I would say finding genetics that are suited for their environment, I think, is a challenge. But it's not as large of a challenge as a market. So we had we talked to hundreds of farmers every season. Multiple farmers said, absolutely, we'd like to grow your genetics, but tell us where we can sell the product. And that's, it's been chicken or the egg, right, with this industry for all the years that we've all been in it. And we try, to get these downstream customers, and we've been successful, but not successful enough for all of the farmers that want to grow hemp and add it to their rotation, simply because there isn't enough downstream activity with ingredient makers and then with, consumer retail products. So
how do we grow those markets?
How do we grow those markets? Wow. It's, one, I think the industry associations are doing a good job with the education. We know consumer trend is towards, non-GMO, away from soy and wheat. I mean, you see wheat acreage, I think it's depressing about 2% per year that we've looked over the last 10 years. So allergies are also, contributing to that. But consumer trend is going more towards alternative proteins. So I think convincing these medium scale supply chain partners before we convince the large scale, because they want to see it proven, right? So convincing them that, yes, this is a valuable ingredient, number one, whether it's for the lipids or the grain, is the first best step. And then we have to convince FDA. Yeah, so that's a bigger step.
Right. Well, let's talk about your certified seeds and the sort of families of seeds that you have. Tell me about your seeds.
Sure. So we have two lines of varieties, one that's called Elite and one that's called Abound. The Elite variety is those varieties are principally for grain production. The Abound varieties are multi-purpose, we like to say. They're certainly high yielding for grain. They are high yielding for fiber, but as we know, the fiber industry is nascent. So what we're in the middle of right now is, collaborating with fiber processors to look at the fiber and tell us what it's good for, what's not good about it, and how we can improve it. So I don't like to sell it as definitely a tri-crop yet, right? Like we need that feedback from the end processors. But absolutely, the CBD content as well as the grain content is excellent for large-scale production. So and very well adapted, especially to our latitude. So as you go across Colorado all the way through to Kentucky, we've got some of the, in some trials, or in most of them, we're the highest yielding grain variety across that belt. Wow. So hemp is very impacted by latitude, of course, because of the flowering time, and we're, working across different latitudes now, more intensely now that we've got it adapted for ours.
Okay. So you're working with farmers in many states?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All the way.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So even in Canada, so we work from Canada down to Texas, and across, the northern latitudes, Minnesota this year, Wisconsin, Kansas, Nebraska, Illinois, Indiana, New York, South Carolina.
A great road trip.
Yes, it's a big it's a big cross section. We did work on the West Coast, but in all transparency, the West Coast is such a strong cannabis region, right? That they don't like the pollination. So it's and their regulations, especially in California, are extremely difficult to wade through, as any hemp advocate in California will tell you. So we principally are going from the Rockies over.
Okay. So what's the vision for the future for New West Genetics, for the hemp industry in general? However you want to answer that. What's your vision for the future? I'd
like to start with one, go back to that regulatory piece, which I didn't elaborate on fully with the FDA. Right now, I'm one of the founding members of the Hemp Feed Coalition, and our belief is that we need offtake products, right? And as well as absolute retail products, but farmers need a place to send their off-spec grain. So there's no reason to not feed hemp to any of your animals, except it's not yet approved by the FDA. So the mission of the Hemp Feed Coalition is to shepherd these, they're called food additive petitions, through the FDA to gain acceptance for use in feed. And we mean, we separate them into consumption and non-consumption animals, right? So if you think about cannabinoid accumulation potential, right? The non-consumption animals are just ripe for feeding hemp to, because no one's going to accumulate cannabinoids from eating their little kitty cat, right? or their dog, right?
Let's hope not. Yeah.
So, thinking about, the strategy is what's the easiest path to approvals and working down that. So I think the Hemp Feed Coalition has really got its legs under them now, and they've accelerated the application process. So that's really key to expanding the industry. We've talked about the corn soy acreage, kind of seesaws in relationship to each other, but, something like 80 million acres each, right, a year roughly. The majority of that soy acreage goes into animal feed. So, there's plenty of opportunity there. And why not feed something that is much more nutritious than soy, just as digestible, but it doesn't have the scale yet. So here's the vision. We need the supply chain, right? We need to prove it, as I said, small and medium scale, and build that supply chain. And honestly, to get really down to brass tacks, what we're looking at is, how can we get into these identity preserved lines, right? As a small scale, sort of typical non-GMO line, organic lines, and prove it from there. So we're working with some small, medium scale supply chain partners this year to do just that. So I'm very hopeful that this is going to catch on, and that's who we need to convince first, so that we can begin taking some of that acreage away from those large, corn and soy folks.
So do you envision a world where it's corn, soy, and hemp, or would hemp sort of take over?
No, I've got a spreadsheet on this, and I can show you down to, over the years up until I think 2028, how hemp achieves 22 million acres of production. That's where we believe it can be by 2028.
Tell me how that happens.
Just for grain acreage.
Yeah.
So we've looked at the impact across soy, corn, and then the minor forage crops, canola, even, sunflower, etc., wheat as well. And it's really, it's not a huge threat. So if we look at, taking, I think it's, something like 4 to 7 million acres from the monsters, right, of corn and soy, and then a number of acres from the smaller ones, it's absolutely doable without being a huge threat, which is something to consider when you think about, the lobbyists, right, for those two crops. So.
Yeah, they've got a lot of money behind them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, the fact that we are not meeting protein demands as it is, right, across the world. So we are not meeting protein demands of the human population. And you can look up a lot of marketing reports on that. The consumer trend is toward alternative proteins. So we're perfect for that. Right? We've got the same amino acids as soy. We've got just as good digestibility. Why not?
Well, tell me where New West Genetics came from. Tell me the creation myth of your business.
Oh, creation myth is a good one. Actually, the 3 founders were in Italy at a Brassica conference. So in 2013, when Colorado passed REC, in that was one sentence that said the Department of Ag needs to set up a regulatory system for hemp. So it's a little known fact about our, sort of state legislative history, but that was the impetus for us to think about it. Now, my two partners are John McKay and Rich Fletcher. John McKay and I are married, and we were not quite ready to take that risk of working on high THC cannabis, right, that would have allowed without federal approval. In 2014, the Farm Bill passed and allowed it to be federally worked on, right, in states where it was regulated. And because of, the 2013 approval of REC in Colorado, we had a regulatory system ready to go. So much like Kentucky, truly, it was just Colorado and Kentucky for the first few years with these solid regulatory programs that enabled us to work. So my partner, John McKay, is a professor at Colorado State University. He's very well versed in complex traits like drought that are controlled by multiple genes. It's a tangled web to figure it out, right? But he's been very successful at doing that. My other partner, Rich Fletcher, worked and led Cargill's breeding program for a number of years, so was highly familiar with lipids, right, and lipid enhancement and breeding. So they were sort of the perfect people to look at this from a very database standpoint, and then I brought the business side. So that was the beginning. We worked hard with very little money for about 4 years. It was a long, grueling. I quit my job and I didn't get paid, and so it was pretty grueling for the first 4 years. But then, as hemp gathered more interest, I would say, from the agricultural sector, that was good for us. That was very helpful. We got some great investors, and we've been able to keep churning that R&D wheel as we go.
Okay, great. Will you get into fiber genetics at some point, or will you stay focused on grain?
We started on fiber in 2019. So we have some interesting fiber genetics coming out. I would say last season we had the highest yielding biomass in about 3 trials across the U.S. So, that while that's all biomass, it's hard to tell who's measuring what, but that was very encouraging to us. And those aren't our final, fiber varieties. Mm-hmm. Fiber is a very different beast, and whether we can tri-crop with fiber depends on how it will be processed. So, that's kind of the feedback loop we're looking for from fiber processors. So if there's fiber processors out there who are willing to trial any of our, some bales of hemp, please give us a call and give us some feedback. We're always happy to receive that. But it's ongoing, and I would say we don't have a product rolled out yet that is specific to fiber, but okay. We will.
Cool. And the best way for farmers out there or processors out there listening to get in touch with you is through your website?
Yeah, through our website, or just info@newwestgenetics.com.
Okay. What else should we talk about? What else would you like to share?
Let's see.
I'm going to talk about building the supply chains.
Sure. Well, that kind of goes part and parcel with getting into these identity preserved lines. So that means, elevators specific to these lines. It's complicated, right? You have to clean it out after every crop. So you almost, in some cases, if they are small scale, they need dedicated elevators to each crop. And the handling all needs to be specific so that you can continue, to track the product as it goes through the supply chain. So getting them, to commit and see the market at the end. And the great thing is that some of these partners also are ingredient makers. So that's super encouraging, and it's almost necessary to bring those folks online. And I can say I'm not going to violate confidentiality of any of our partners, but we have a couple of those doing that this season.
Cool, that's exciting.
On a smaller scale. So we definitely, hope that goes well and is good proof to folks using these ingredients that it's a superior grain to and just just to have clarity with everyone out there, they'll be like, oh no, it's an oil seed. It's both, right? That's what's so unique about it. It has this wonderful protein profile, and it also has this amazing lipid profile that no other row crop has. So it's both an oil seed as well as something that we can utilize for protein.
The goodness of hemp.
Yeah.
Yeah. So getting back to the future of New West Genetics, you have products in the pipeline that you can talk about?
Yes, we do. There's maybe 3 that I can talk about, and the most exciting one is our gender-skewed variety. We haven't named it yet, but that's a good description of what it is. So as you know, the sort of ancestral state of hemp is to be dioecious, and it's roughly, all of those varieties are roughly 50-50, unless you're going through and hand changing them, right, for fiber with the monoecious varieties. We have identified the genes that are controlling the gender, and my R&D team has figured out how to skew that from 50-50 to up to 95% female and 5% male. So what this will do is you'll be able to plant it out just like you normally would with any seed, but at the end you'll have almost double the yield.
Right. Wow.
So that's really exciting. It's a true hybrid. You'll hear some people use the word hybrid incorrectly, but this is a true hybrid variety and a hybrid system, much like you see in corn. In addition, we have one that we just love because it's going to be a great rotation for winter wheat, and it is our frost-tolerant variety. So you can put it in here in Colorado. We've been able to put it in March and pull it out before they need to put their winter wheat in. In addition, we're looking at, some resistance to herbicide, which, down in the Southeast in particular, there's some need for that, and also across, the Midwest, farmers who wouldn't typically work organically struggle with how to grow this crop. So that would be helpful for them. And it's all in the name of getting into that rotation and improving the sustainability. So, what is going to be safe, but also help these farmers succeed. So those are 3 that we're working on right now.
Cool. And the gender skewed thing you talked about, how is that different from like a feminized seed?
So feminized seed is usually created in the greenhouse, and they, apply a chemical to induce the feminization. This seed that we have created requires no chemical application, and it can be done on a much larger scale than feminized seed. And its principal product, is meant to be grain, although we can certainly breed our high CBD genetics into it as well.
Cool. Wendy, thank you so much for having me out here today.
Thank you for having me, Eric. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and hearing what's happening on the East Coast. I always love those updates.
Okay, that's it for today's show. Thank you for listening. My name is Eric Herlock, and I've been on the road for 2 weeks with my family, visiting hemp businesses in the fiber and grain sectors of the hemp industry. Tomorrow we get up bright and early and head to Monte Vista, Colorado, where we'll meet with the folks from Formation Ag, makers of hemp harvesting and processing equipment. Look for that episode soon. Until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper.
Industrial hemp.
Episode 145 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2021 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written and recorded, edited and produced by Eric Herlock, and any music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.